And welcome back to a special edition of Pastor Plek's podcast, recording here in Austin, Texas. And I have the one and only Leah Brown, who has been an advocate in the pro-life movement for really the past 15 years.
Yeah, the past 15 years, I think, professionally and I guess in college too.
Yeah, so talk to me about how you got started.
Well, let me tell you, when I was a little girl, my dream was to go to law school. And like every optimistic, naive little girl that loves the law, I wanted to litigate Roe v. Wade. I had a dream. I was like, that's what I want to do.
So instead of litigating Roe v. Wade, you've been, advocating for babies. Mm-hmm. And you've been involved in a bunch of different organizations. Specifically, do you want to throw out some?
Yeah, well, when I graduated college, I decided not to go to law school.
Why?
I just didn't want to do more school. You roped me into what it meant to actually live and do things rather than just study them, you know?
Well, that was fun.
Especially with faith.
Yeah, faith being good.
Yes, studying faith's good, but man, sharing your faith's really good.
Really good.
And so I kind of took that approach. I was like, I don't want to study this stuff anymore. I don't want to study politics. I don't want to study law. I just want to go do something. So I graduated. I came down to Austin with no job, no place to live.
You were a lifeguard for a bit.
Well, actually, yes, I was. I was a lifeguard because I knew I could do that. And while I was on break lifeguarding, I was doing a Google search looking for jobs, and I found a job being a communications assistant at the time. I was 21 for a pro-life lobbying group, pro-life advocacy group called Texas Alliance for Life. So I got involved there. I did not know what I was up against. I'll tell you, my first night on the job, we were at the Capitol till 4 a.m. And I learned more about politics and the pro-life issue in that one day than I had learned in 4 years studying it. And I was like, I'm never going back.
Wow.
This is what I'm doing.
Okay, well, that's exciting. Now, the reason why I have you on is because we had a big leak happen. Politico leaked it's not even an official opinion. It's a draft opinion.
Right.
That
so
Samuel Alito had written.
Yeah, Politico didn't leak it necessarily. Politico makes it pretty clear that there is an individual within the court, which means probably a clerk of a justice or a justice, more likely a clerk of a justice. And they leaked this opinion, the whole thing, to a journalist at Politico. And Politico published it last night around 8 o'clock.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a draft opinion.
I mean, I read it last night about 8:30. So
right.
I was like, this is crazy. And then my wheels started spinning. I was like, we need to talk about this. And then this morning at about 8 a.m., I was like, Leah, we need you in here ASAP.
And I'm excited to be here because there's nothing I'd rather be talking
about. All right,
about.
so let's talk about this opinion. What exactly did Justice Alito write that because the court can't change the law necessarily, or maybe they can change the law, but they can strike down. I guess they can strike down the law is the best way to put that, and then push it back to the states. Is that
so? They're not really striking down a law; they're striking down precedent.
Precedent,
right? So in 1973,
mm-hmm.
Yes, 1973, the court found what they call a right to abortion in the Constitution, which if you read the Constitution, a right to abortion is not there, but they kind of found it through a right to privacy. And they kind of created that. They didn't codify it. They didn't put it in law.
Right.
They just put it in precedent.
Okay, that's
and, when we make laws, we have to follow the rule of law, and the court they interpret the law. So we have to follow what they interpreted.
This is good because I think sometimes, and I know we're going into like con law, but what happens a lot is this is called legislating from the bench, I guess is what we're calling this, because it wasn't pushed to the people to define what the law was. They just took a ruling because at the time, abortion was considered murder. And so would that be a good way to put that?
At the time, abortion was a matter left up to the states. So It wasn't federally outlawed in most states.
But it was in Austin, Texas, right?
Is it in Dallas, Texas?
Dallas. Okay,
mm-hmm.
It was Dallas. So it was Dallas, Texas, where it originally sort of started and then made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And in
1973, the court said, abortion is a fundamentally protected right through privacy, and it is not allowed for the states to legally, in law, outlaw it.
Okay. So at that point, you could have an abortion up to how old? Or how many months or weeks? Do you remember?
I don't think that Roe made a line. I think it was Planned Parenthood v. Casey in 1992,
right,
where they created the 3-trimester kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you've ever been pregnant and you've ever gone to the doctor, your first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, that was kind of created in Roe v. Wade to say you couldn't You couldn't. Sorry, I hear my baby crying.
Well, that's perfect. It's like,
You couldn't abort a baby after it was viable.
Right.
That was the new standard.
Right. Because if I remember correctly, and this is the part where you can probably correct me, in the original arguments in 1973, what they said is you couldn't determine that a baby was a baby, or like if it had a heartbeat or not, or if it was
they
going
weren't
to live
even
viability. It was like a bizarre.
They weren't
reasoning.
willing to say that it was necessarily a life.
Right.
And remember, we didn't have like ultrasound technology back then. We just knew women were pregnant. I mean, pregnant women could feel a baby kicking, right? So you'd assume that is a life, but we didn't have the same science that we have now.
So talk to me about the progression then of, I guess, how in 93 it looked, or 92 it looked like, man, abortion's full on going for it. But then over time, at least in Texas, laws were passed to, like, we just had one passed back in last year, December, November. When was that passed? It was like 6 weeks.
Yeah, so there were, since 1992, really, I mean, even since the day, I mean, since 1973 that Roe became the law of the land, is what people like to say, the pro-life movement kind of blew up, and they've been pushing back, trying to put everything they possibly can into law to make it harder for somebody seeking abortion to get an abortion, because, I mean, the goal was to save as many lives as they can. You know, any way you slice it, now especially, nobody denies that it's a life. The argument has really changed from Roe times to where they said, oh, it's not really alive, and then Casey, they said, oh, well, it's not really viable.
Right.
It can't live outside the womb. So it doesn't deserve the same protections
until some started living outside the womb after
Right.
they were tried to be killed.
That's true. And so there have been laws passed. And so Texas has passed a lot. There was a big case out of Texas that went all the way to the Supreme Court about 10 years ago. Well, 5 years ago, the Supreme Court heard it. 10 years ago, it was passed.
Right.
And the Supreme Court struck it down, and they said, nope, we're not going to uphold this. And I was at the Supreme Court, actually, when that happened, and it was devastating. It was
You were in D.C. at the Supreme Court. Were you like watching it happen? Or
I was listening. I was in the courtroom listening to oral argument, and it was really sad that we lost that case, because we thought that was the closest we were going to get to really being able to protect lives inside the womb. But yeah, last year, Texas, they passed really two that were significant. They passed the heartbeat law, I believe is the one you were referencing, which is it's an interesting piece of legislation. We won't get into all the nitty gritty, but it kind of had effectively outlawed abortion in Texas after 6 weeks.
Yeah, 6 weeks. That's pretty crazy. And some people don't even find out they're pregnant till they're 6 weeks.
Right. I mean, so unbelievably, that law has been upheld. If you had asked me a year ago, would it be upheld, I would have said no way. But it has, and that's lives saved, so yay. But let me tell you, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There was another law passed last year that hasn't been talked about as much, called the Human Life Protection Act. And that law, and a lot of states did this, they put into law that abortion would be outlawed in the event that Roe was overturned, because they were anticipating this Dobbs decision coming down, and they were anticipating it being on the pro-life side. I mean, a lot of people thought that it would be. And
and there's something on this too, that pro-life isn't just a conservative issue, but it has been championed by the right. But this is something that a lot of people fall into, I guess, I don't want to call it conservative. It's just people believe that children should not be killed. People believe that babies, even whether, from a sense womb all the way through their time in the womb, are a viable life that God has given. And one of the things I think is important, again, this isn't just a conservative issue, that Christians from all across left and right truly believe this. And there was a reason for it. I think one of the verses that comes to mind, Psalm 139, verse 14 through 16, I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. In other words, God has plans for babies. And when we, as humans, gets into the morality issue of it, when we cut short a life, we're saying, God, you don't know what you're doing. God, I'll take it from here. Your design of that person or that baby or of that life is not, it's inconvenient, or it's not goes with my life. I'm sorry. I can't go with you with there. So therefore, I'm going to take over your job as being king of the universe. And that's how I've seen that. And that's what gets to be challenging, because remember, this is where thou shalt not kill. This gets into a murder place because you're taking a life. And I know when you say that, that gets to be very, and you've probably dealt with a lot of women in this specific, but like when you say murder, you're like, wow, that's a hard word to put on someone. But that's why right to life people are so such strong advocates, because you're taking a life. And I don't know of another word that accurately describes that.
Gosh. Well, I'm glad you're speaking out about this. This is great. Yeah, it is. That's why it's such a polarizing issue. And honestly, I think that abortion is a really hard thing to talk about in the church a lot of times, because a lot of people have abortions. And a lot of women,
Right.
just clarify, a lot of women have abortions.
It's actually important to clarify these days.
It is these days. It is. They do. And a lot of we talked, I don't think that podcast has been released yet, but we've talked about guilt and shame, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of shame surrounding abortion. One of the things, but I think there's also a lot of misunderstanding around it.
Right.
So one of the things that I still do, I'm a stay-at-home mom, but I write a lot for some different pro-life groups and do a little bit of work for them. And one of my favorite things to do is write these stories about women who are looking for an abortion, but because they believe it's their only option.
Right.
They believe it's what you do. Our culture has normalized it. And if they're experiencing an unexpected pregnancy, an abortion's my only way out. They feel trapped.
Right.
But they, in some instances, praise God, they get connected with these local groups, centers that come around them and help them explain their options, offer support, offer financial support, offer physical support, offer emotional support, counseling, all the things that honestly I think every woman who has a baby needs some emotional support afterward. And they offer all of these things. And so I get to write these stories about women who are looking for an abortion, and the second that they realize that they're not alone, that they realize that there are people that want to walk beside them, that want to provide for them financially and physically, they change their minds instantly. And so the women that don't end up doing that, I think most of the time they really just feel trapped. And I think it's important for the church to have a lot of compassion for those women. Yeah.
So talk about, so if someone has, and I want to get back into Justice Alito. So I feel we'll get there. But I do feel like this is important to talk about. Like, what about people who have had an abortion? Where would they go to get healing? Where would they go to start? I mean, like, and I think you've probably dealt with people who've gone through an abortion, but also those who've, hey, all right, so I had the baby and this is the direction I took. But first to the ladies that had an abortion, where is a place for them to get healing?
So I know I have an acquaintance, somebody I've worked with, a friend who she runs a ministry called And Then There Were None, and she hosts these pro-life, she hosts these abortion healing retreats.
Okay.
And what they do is they have licensed counselors. She actually is a licensed counselor. I believe she just got licensed. But they have other licensed counselors come alongside, and they host these retreats, and they invite women who've experienced abortion who are still feeling the pain, because women feel pain after abortion. Oh, yeah.
I mean, emotional, physical, the spiritual, the whole thing.
And they invite them to come along to a place where there's no judgment. There's no guilt. There's no shame. There's just love. There's counseling, and there's also, physical support, like we talked about. Right. And did I name that organization?
No, you haven't.
And Then There Were None.
And then but you didn't name the person. I don't know if that's like
it's Abby Johnson.
Yeah, so Abby Johnson's kind of a big deal.
Well, she's great. She's awesome. But what I love most about her is her heart for two different groups of people that you don't see as much of in the pro-life, or we don't talk about as much of in the pro-life movement, and that is women who are hurting from abortion. Her heart is, because she is a woman. She ran
an abortion clinic.
Facilitated lots of abortions. She had abortions herself, and she has a huge heart for women that have experienced that. She's walked through it herself. She's walked through the healing. And so she's designed this entire ministry around helping other women walk through that healing. And it's been really powerful.
Yeah. And man, thank God for organizations like that. But ultimately, thank God for Jesus, right? Because no matter what you have done, and this is where I want everybody to hear this, that Jesus goes to the cross and dies the death that you deserve for the murder of abortion or the murder of hating your brother in your heart. He equivocates those and dies for them, and then he is raised from the dead, and then he empowers you to go and love him, love people, and then share that hope that you have with the world and make disciples. And so one of the things I think it's super important is we overemphasize, well, just to a point of like, that's okay, that's enough. No, Jesus died for you. There is healing for you. You don't have to live in shame. You don't have to live in the darkness. You don't have to kind of wrap yourself in guilt, but you can be freed with the blood of Jesus. Now, again, I don't want to not say that enough, because that is the grace and truth that the Bible so clearly inundates over and over and over again. Okay. We're going to move forward though. So, like we said, abortion is a matter of life and death of a human being made in God's image, right? So this is why theologically, anytime you put to death something that God has said, don't. Remember, the reason why God was always against murder is that it was taking his image global, and that his image means something to the world. So if you are made in God's image, you are in a sense where God has tagged the world with you to show the world that he rules. You're his marking on the earth. So when you remove that marking, you are saying, this is my territory. I'm taking over now. Thank you very much. So God is from the very moment of conception is involved in your life from the get-go. And then more than that, he wants to see the proliferation of people across the world to show that the whole universe is his. All right. To Justice Alito, his draft opinion, it's just crazy to me that like this got circulated. But first, can you talk to us about what exactly is in there? You mentioned it's going back to making it a states' right issue. How? And then secondly, how did this get leaked?
Because I have all the answers.
Listen, you have all the answers. I trust. Listen, when Leah Brown is on the show, she is an expert of all things. And so I totally know that when I throw you a softball like this of like, what is in this thing? And then what does it mean for this? And I just love the fact that it's literally a first draft that got out. And how
let me talk about the draft for a second. So within the Supreme Court,
it's a 98-page draft.
They know how to write, okay? And Alito is actually kind of famous he's well-known, renowned for his writing opinions that are just cut and dry. Like something that he can take a very difficult decision, a very difficult legal concept, and make it easy to understand, easy to digest for the average person, and people love that about him. He's also famous for his one-liners. He has some really good ones. I'm trying to find the one-liner that was in here that really almost brought some tears to my eyes. But essentially, I can't find it to quote it, but essentially he said, this court believes that Roe and Casey must be overturned and that there is no right to abortion in the Constitution.
Wow.
And that's kind of a summary. Let me talk a little bit more about the opinion, though.
Yeah.
So this is something in the Supreme Court. It honestly has been really the only sacrosanct institution left in American politics. Like the only place where the right and the left have been working together.
Right.
And there's a trust and a respect and integrity that won't be broken. And so the fact that this opinion has leaked is a complete destruction of that.
Right.
I mean, it's going to change everything. I think that one reporter who's been reporting on the Supreme Court for years, decades, honestly, she said, like, I cannot overstate the explosiveness of this and how it's going to completely shake the makeup of the Supreme Court. It's honestly kind of tragic, right?
Right.
So, but the reason why there has to be so much integrity and so much trust within the Supreme Court among the clerks and the justices is because it is a huge decision-making body. And so this opinion, something justices do is we can't look at this opinion and say, we don't know for sure that this is the majority opinion and it's just waiting to get the signatures and then be released in June and boom, everything will be done. We don't know that because justices write opinions like this and their clerks help them. Help them. Alito actually usually writes his own, but they write them and then they circulate them to try to convince other justices to sign on. So even though they voted, I believe that Politico says, I actually think the opinion said that there was a 5-4 vote in February after the Supreme Court heard the case. You still have to kind of decide what is the official statement that the court's going to put out. And you could have 3 or 4 or 5 justices write an opinion, a draft opinion, to circulate, to try to get other justices to jump on board and say, this is the statement we're going to put out, to come to an agreement. Does that make sense? So this could have just been one of those.
Right. Yeah, you have no idea.
We don't know.
And what I thought was interesting, especially if it's 5-4, because so that must have been like Chief Justice, he's kind of the sway vote if there, but I guess when there's 6-3 in a sense,
he voted against the case 10 years ago that I referenced, and that was we thought we were going to get a 5-4 decision on that. We thought we would probably lose.
Yeah, we
thought we had 1 swing vote. Apparently there were 2, and Roberts was the other one. It was a 6-3, and he voted against the pro-life side, and that was. So anyway, not surprised here. Not surprised at all.
But what he did say is he is going to essentially order a marshal of the court to launch an investigation to determine who leaked this document to Politico. What does that mean? That to me, when I listen to that, I'm like,
I don't know what that means, because this has never happened before.
That's a good point.
At least not in modern history.
Right, but essentially they're going to lock it down and start interviewing people and being like, and who's going to do that? Anyway,
they've got to prosecute it. I mean, this can't happen. I mean, this is so sad.
Wow.
It's going to destroy. Gosh.
So the other thing that's interesting is this has really, and there's probably so many reasons for this to get leaked in an election year, in midterms, right? And maybe so. Could this be a tool of people like, hey, we need to get the left to kind of rise up and remember there's something to vote for, there's something to get out there. And
so there was a report even last week, I think, from the Wall Street Journal. They kind of knew this. If you go back and read it now, you can see that they knew this was coming. There were rumors that there had been a leak, and there was kind of an effort gearing up to push back against this.
Right.
So it wasn't a huge shock to the court. There were rumors, but one could speculate that this opinion was leaked by the side that lost to jar up outrage, to try to influence the decision of the court, because they could still change their minds.
Right.
Like, they haven't signed anything, right?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, what you're saying is this is just an opinion. And so,
it's not just opinions are a pretty big deal, but it's not final till it's final.
Right.
And everything could change. I don't think anything is going to change. I don't think that the 5 justices that voted to overturn Roe and Casey did so lightly. I don't think that. I think they knew what they were getting into, not just as far as court precedent and law go, but they knew what they were getting into in the court of public opinion.
Right.
They knew the state of our country and how polarized we are right now. They saw cities burn 2 summers ago. They've seen the news. They've seen the outrage on both sides. This isn't a shock. So anyway, any repercussions that could come from this being leaked, I don't think it's going to change their minds. I think they knew what they were getting into. And that does imply that the person who leaked this was probably doing so to change their minds. Right. To scare them.
Yeah.
And
that's crazy.
That is sad.
That is sad. Okay, so what is next? When is this? Was this supposed to come out in June? Or?
Yeah, usually. So the court's term ends in June. They get the summer off, and they typically release a lot of their hot button opinions at the very end of the term, and then they go on vacation, right?
Yeah, and then they can just let it burn.
Turn off our phones, computers, go get on a yacht. I don't know if they have yachts, but I don't remember their salaries. They probably don't have yachts, but yeah. So this typically we would have expected it in a couple weeks, but my guess, if I had to speculate, they'll probably release an opinion any day now. Right.
Well, I mean,
a formal opinion.
If you think they're gonna, instead of waiting until June, they'll release it sooner.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Why? I'd love to just. I mean,
it's less time for the anger to percolate. Like less time for people to try to change their minds. Right.
Got it.
Make it a done deal now, so that people don't think that they can be activists and change the minds of the Supreme Court.
Wow. I mean,
which, look, I don't mean to hate on anyone.
Right.
Both sides do it.
Yeah,
okay?
Sure.
The Supreme Court justices are supposed to be ironclad against politics. They're not.
Yeah.
Right? They're supposed to be ironclad against the public opinion. They're not. Both sides do it.
Sure. Okay,
but not both.
I guess the question I have is there's been rumors of an expanding of the court based upon, it's a way to get more of your own people in there, so to speak. What do you think about that?
Hashtag pack the court.
Yeah, pack the court. And so if you're not familiar, so right now there's 9 justices, correct?
And there have been.
And there have been for...
Not forever, but for a long time.
Was there ever 12?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
No. So what I do think that means is that there are a lot of... if you moved it to 12 or you moved it to, I guess probably an odd number would make more sense.
It has to be an odd number.
Move it to 13 or maybe 11. Now you could just stick 2 more of your people on there, and then, or 3 or 4, and then now all of a sudden you've got, now decisions can be made easily for the next however many years. And so that is an option that's probably on the table. Correct?
It wouldn't change anything in this decision.
It wouldn't, but you could then lobby against someone has an abortion, they get prosecuted or whatever, and then all of a sudden now they take it back to the Supreme Court and say this is a unconstitutional law.
Right. So I don't think that's going to happen because we already saw that some of the Democrats in the Senate, in order to change the number of people on the Supreme Court, the Senate would have to do that. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that,
supermajority,
you would have to have a supermajority. And we already saw that some of the Democrats in the Senate weren't willing to do that. They're not willing to end the filibuster. Like
right.
Joe Manchin being one.
Right.
He voted against doing that
right.
recently.
Okay, so what do you think is next? What is the church's response here? Just and maybe this is where we can talk about this, but what do you think, as the church that believe in the image, the image of God, dignity of man, our responsibility in a world that's not a theocracy. I mean, clearly we don't live in a theocracy, but we can influence the culture to live out how God has called us to live.
Can we go back to the theocracy comment
before
before we move forward?
Yeah, let's go to theocracy. Go ahead. Yeah.
Because there has been some talk about this exact issue on Christian and political Twitter.
Okay. Yeah, hit me. I've not been.
You don't follow Tim Keller?
I do follow Tim Keller, but just not recently. Go ahead.
I love Tim Keller.
I love Tim Keller
so much, but recently.
What did he say?
Oh man. Well, there's just this debate about, Christians can agree the Bible says do not murder. Like a Christian would agree that abortion is wrong, right? But do we really think that a lot of times Christians who do support the idea of abortion, they'll come back to this argument. They'll say, do we think that just because it's a Christian moral biblical issue that the government should legislate it? Should the government tell us we cannot kill babies just because Christians think we can't kill babies? And do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand.
Why do we legislate into law what Christians believe?
And I would say to that, we do that all the time. What law is legislating morality. You're determining what's right and what's wrong. So therefore, if we have a biblical worldview, we should probably be doing all that we can to bring God's view of the world into the public sphere. Now, are there limits to that? I think that's why I feel like this is the common grace of God, like for things like murder. It's not. It's in Romans 14 or 13. Romans 13, where the king does not bear the sword for nothing. So, and that's not just Christian kings. That was the Roman emperor of the time to mete out justice for us to experience the common grace of God. We required that the emperor would fulfill God's mandate as his magistrate, even if he wasn't, listen to God at all. And so I feel like there's a part of that. We want to influence the king, government, whatever, to execute biblical justice for things like, especially murder, because that benefits the whole of society.
Right.
So I think because I understand, because there's what about gay marriage? Do I think that?
Oh gosh.
Now I'm going.
Let's go with a different example.
Okay, sorry. I won't go down that one. How
about Can you talk about, I was going to ask you this.
Yeah.
Why that law? Why the law of murder, which
Yeah.
you've a little bit answered it, but I like it, in killing, versus the laws of shaving heads and the laws of the Old Testament? Maybe that's a simpler one.
Yeah,
to
I
go
mean,
for.
okay, well, now we're getting into, what is the Old Testament? It's made up of essentially 3 different things. One is the civil law, which would have been like, if my ox gores my neighbor, I owe him 22 shekels or whatever. Or one would be like, don't mix polyester. All right, that yeah, or don't wear polyester. That is like an abomination, right? You're like, oh man, polyester. I think we're all rolling in some sort of form of abomination, except for 100% cotton wearers. But no, what that was a ceremonial law to create a distinction between Israel and the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
There was a high barrier of entry, at least for men, to become a Jew, and that was circumcision. That was a ceremonial law put in place so that you would have a distinct group of people, and the way that they dressed, the way that they lived would be different from the rest of the world, so that to become a follower of Yahweh, follower of God, I made a physical transition from what I ate to what I wore, to how I cut my hair, to all, and to my literal body. Yeah. So I feel like that's the ceremonial law. And then ultimately then the moral law is stuff like that never changes, which gets us back to sex. God's design for sex, God's design for human life, God's design for the heart. Don't covet stuff that's not yours. Be content. Don't bear false witness. Or morally, there have no other gods before God. Don't make any graven images. Don't take the Lord's name in vain.
Can I clarify something? We find these moral laws in the Old Testament too. We don't just write off laws in the Old Testament.
Right. No, those are moral laws from the Old Testament that carry. So the moral law carries over. So the moral law is a forever. It's like if it's moral in the Old Testament, therefore it's moral in the New Testament. Yeah. And so those laws are the 10 Commandments, except for keep the Sabbath day holy. And this is probably where I'll get a whole bunch of argument. Jesus keeps the Sabbath day holy because he is the Sabbath day rest.
If that's where we get argument after this podcast, then so be it.
Sorry. Now I'm going into stay focused, Pastor Plek. Stay focused on what the issue is.
No, it's good. It's important to
but
explain.
The first 3 are about God. Number 4 is the Sabbath day holy. Number 5 is honor your father and mother. And then 6 through 10 are,
These are the 10 Commandments you're referencing.
Yeah, sorry. The 10 Commandments. These are various laws that were the moral laws of the day that carried over. Now, there were 613 total laws, but they fit into civil, ceremonial, moral. And that's why it's a little bit challenging to say. That's why when people talk about abortion, be like, well, why do we care? Well, that's a moral law. I think everyone would not get on board with that. But when you talk about, there was whenever God would get angry with a culture and would call for their justice, like justice would be had on a culture for worshiping the god Molech, who called for them to sacrifice their babies. So God would then bring in the Israelites, who would march in, destroy an entire culture, and we would go, that's like colonialism and genocide, and that's so bad. Unless it was just meted out on a society for wrongfully murdering a whole bunch of people. Because just because you don't acknowledge God doesn't mean God is not still God of the universe, and his justice will be carried out. Sometimes on this side of heaven, and sometimes on beyond our own lives. And I know I think we went.
No, I think
beyond.
this is good. This is great.
I do feel like just understanding that God has a moral law that you may not acknowledge because you don't believe in God, but that still applies to you.
Good.
And so what we try to do as Christians is we want to influence the king, the government, to have laws that represent a biblical worldview, not so that we can morally triumph over everybody, but so that people would have the most blessing and success in this world, and there are create boundaries for people to live within that would honor God and then bring blessing to our nation. To which you're like, okay, Chris, blessing of the nation.
That's good. And so that's why we care about laws, and that's why we care about God's law, God's moral laws being influencing our cultural laws.
Absolutely. And I will say, remember, whenever the Jewish people were exiled to Babylon, they said, pray for the good of the city, meaning Babylon, and work for in its prosperity is your prosperity. So in the spiritual prosperity of our nation is the prosperity of our people. When we do things that honor God and we have laws that represent his will, then God blesses that. Now, I feel like that you can, like, what does that mean? I feel like might be an over, like, does that mean everyone's going to get like sports cars and stuff? No, that doesn't mean that, but there is
Where's mine?
Yeah, where's mine? But also it's there's like you get to experience the common grace of God. We have experienced 200 years of the common grace of God. Now that doesn't mean our world has been perfect. It has been very flawed. Civil War was a great example of what happens when you don't address sin of the nation, and there is recompense for that. And there's a lot of people that die. And so I do feel like, but the ultimate wrath of God was taken out on Jesus, and so that's where our ultimate hope is. And however, while we're here on earth, we want to look for the good of the city, good of the state, good of the nation.
It's important to care.
It's important to care.
Another way I think we can care about this issue as Christians is to be active, not just in the legal affairs, which is where I've spent a lot of time, but also I'm spending more of my time now, which is helping women, helping women who are facing the decisions of abortion, helping women who are choosing life for their babies. I mean, like, think about Wells Ranch Community Church. If one woman came in here and she was questioning whether she would be able to, afford raise her baby, like if every person in this church bought her one diaper, right? Like, she'd be set, or bought her a box of diapers, she'd be set for the rest of that baby's life, So there are things that we can do, and it comes down to a lot more than diapers, right? But there's a lot that we can do as Christians and as the church to support women, because with abortion, it is effectively illegal right now in Texas as is. And there are a lot of women that don't know what to do when they find themselves facing an unexpected pregnancy or an unplanned pregnancy.
And they're thinking, I need to get to, what's the closest state that allows abortion?
Right. We want to shift their minds. We want to help them think, rather than how do I get to the next state that'll allow abortions? It's how do I get some support? How do I get help? Because guess what? There are so many places. Not to mention Texas allocates millions of dollars. I think it's around 13 million right now every year they give that money directly to organizations that are designed to help women in crisis pregnancies. So the government's doing some of that, but then you have like local pregnancy centers like Pflugerville Pregnancy Resource Center. There's a lot in Austin, right? Yeah. So how do we get women in those pregnancy centers with life-affirming support? How do we help them in the church? Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of ways. And one of the things that's super important, I know we have a lot of couples at our church that are going through the foster program to foster to adopt. There are those who have adopted children. And I think that becomes a really powerful place. One of the places... who was I talking to? I just met with them. They used to meet at Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible had a pregnancy resource center for a while, which I think they moved it. Yeah. Where'd that go to? Yeah.
I'm not sure.
We'll put that in the show notes. But yeah, there's a way to get involved where you are advocating for people. And what I want to remind is, I don't want this to be like, this is the social justice, things that sometimes I can often criticize as the social justice issues, but biblical justice, where we're putting Jesus at the forefront, that his death, burial, resurrection is the reason that I live and breathe. And I want to bring that sort of hope to the world, is a way that we can not only get involved, because we want everyone to be saved, because it's not just enough to live a life and then die and go to hell. I want you to live a life, experience transformation, because people loved you enough to not only save your life, but to save your soul. And I think that ultimately becomes the ultimate hope that we have, because if we kind of like, if we just save a baby, but then don't save a soul, then we've sort of like...
No, there are usually two or three people that need to be saved when it comes to this decision. It's the baby, it's the mom, it's the father. Like all those people need love and help and support. And ultimately, we know that comes most fulfillingly through Christ.
Right.
But also, we can be the hands and feet of Christ and help them.
Let's be what it is to love people really well. So, that's my encouragement for you. Is obviously one of the things you can do really easily is pray, and you're praying for the nation. You're praying for these justices. You're praying for mothers, soon to be mothers that are sitting there going, "What in the world am I going to do?" And then you're looking to be hands and feet of Jesus and love people right where they're at.
Donate your baby clothes to pregnancy centers, not to Goodwill.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
There you go.
There's, Round Rock Pregnancy Resource Center, Pflugerville Pregnancy Resource Center. Those are two great places to go. And they would love to take all your stuff.
Diapers,
the whole
baby
thing.
gear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you can get $2 for your old bouncer on Facebook Marketplace, or
donate
you can clean it up and bring it to a pregnancy center, and a mom who really needs it will get it for free.
Boom.
That's why whenever people, I had a baby 4 months ago.
Way to go.
Hopefully he's still alive out there. Joni's taking good care of him.
Yeah, I'm sure he's fine.
And I had so many people just so kindly, because this was my first boy. Hopefully not last. My husband will love that plug.
Wow. Way to go. I didn't. Well, hold on. So is this like an announcement? Are you trying to tell us something that you guys are not trying for another baby?
No, I'm 4 months postpartum, dude. But he's so sweet. I love him so much. Could also be the hormones. Anyway, I had so many people offer to give me clothes when I found out I was having a baby. And I always say yes, because I like to funnel those to these life-affirming centers that I know give them away for free to people that really, really need them, because people really do need baby clothes, especially with inflation. They're so expensive. And I donate the good ones. Bamboo, man.
Boom. Way to go. All right. Well, hey, listen, this has been a challenging thing for us all to talk about. And Leah, would you come back and talk to us if we have more questions about this issue?
Anytime.
All right. So, you can text us at 737-231-0605. We would love to hear from you. If you're wrestling with the decision here, if you want to kind of take, hey, how do I take a next step in sort of moving forward in helping people that are facing an unwanted or unplanned pregnancy, we would love to help you move forward in that. And Leah would love to give you several steps to go forward with that. So looking forward to all your guys' responses. Please share this, subscribe to us. We would love to see this message go around the globe. We're really trying to help people really see life from a Christian worldview. But also we're talking faith, culture, and everything in between here at Pastor Plek's podcast. So let people know. Have an awesome week of worship.